Halloween Irish? Many people think that Halloween is American, but it has its roots in Irish culture, in the ancient festival of Samhain. Over time, different cultural traditions, different religious elements mixed and merged in, and we get what we now know as the festival of Halloween. So to bring you on a journey back through time, to unpick those strands that knitted together to become Halloween. Firstly, what is Samhain? Samhain is a pre-Christian festival celebrated in the Celtic regions of Europe. The name for the festival comes from Celtic language, and in Old Irish we have two root words, so the etymology or the history of the words go back to Sav and Fuan. So Sav is the same root word from which we get the word Saura, the Irish for summer, and Fuan means end. So it's thought the literal meaning of Samhain is summer's end. So Sav, Fuan, Savwain, Samhain. And that it's the summer's end and the start of winter, and in that sense is the new year, the start of the next annual round, because the year begins at Samhain in the darkness. It begins at winter, and Samhain is the traditional start of winter in the Irish calendar. It's thought that the Celts divided the year into a dark half and a bright half. And in traditional cosmology and in indigenous ways of thinking, time is cyclical. So when we envision the year as a circle, Samhain is directly across from another festival, Bealtaine, on the 1st of May, which is the traditional start of summer. So Bealtaine marks the start of the light half, and Samhain marks the start of the dark half. So it's also thought that the Celts measured time by nights rather than days, so that they measured things beginning in darkness, and that continued on in the structure of the Irish ritual year, or calendar customs, with the festivities or the observances beginning on the eve of, the day before the feast day or the particular festival. And in this case, it's October 31st. So there are different names for that night. Iha Hauna, which is Samhain night, or sometimes winter's night. Iha Naspridina, or spirit night. And Puka night. So the Puka is an otherworldly, shape-shifting being that takes the form of different animals, often a horse or a goat, and comes out at Samhain to spit or urinate on the fruit. So it's unlucky after Samhain to pick fruit from the bushes or eat it. So the year beginning in darkness, it's symbolically reborn then through the annual round. The light increases as the year comes round to Imbolc, the traditional start of spring, associated with the goddess Breed and later Saint Bridget, and then the light increases through the equinox until it's at its zenith at the summer solstice in June. So the balance of light and dark is important in Celtic cultures and in indigenous ways of thinking, in cosmologies, in ancient times and in modern times as well, and also the balance of light and dark. And it's not until much later in time that you get this dichotomy or this binary of light being associated with the positive or goodness, and dark being associated with evil or moral badness. This kind of idea comes in, especially with the Christian religion, where you get, hell is associated with darkness lit only by fire and brimstone, and heaven is bright and angels with their shining halos. Jesus is the light of the world. So this is quite a different understanding. So there's a lot of themes of darkness and light, and then there are many other cycles that have that gestation in darkness, like seeds coming out of the darkness of the soil and into the light, and a baby in the womb is born out into the light of the world, and so on. So those themes that are knitted together in the environment and the world around us. So Samhain is a time associated with literal and symbolic death. And it's a symbolic death of the year. The old year is passing away. And it's a literal time associated time with literal death as well, with the slaughter of animals. And that's because in Ireland, traditionally, herd animals, like we can think cattle, were brought in from the summer pastures, and farmers had to decide which animals they were going to keep through the winter and to feed through the winter. So they'd have to have enough food in store. So Samhain, they would slaughter some animals, and it became associated with feasting on the meat and of throwing the carcasses into fires. And we have a Middle English word, 16th century, bane fire, which comes from a description of bones burning in a fire. So a bone fire or bonfire. So that's where we get this word. And bonfires are very significant at Samhain. So in ancient Ireland, on the sacred hills, particularly in the middle, where Meath and Westmeath are, lots of fires were lit on those hills. And the hill of Tara in County Meath, the seat of the ruling king, a royal site, had the Feis Tarach, or the Feast of Tara, 3 days, and 3 days before and 3 days after Samhain. So this is specifically connected with Samhain and fire lighting. And also the hill of Tlachtga, which is also the name of goddess, in Athboy, the hill of Ward, also in County Meath. So there were fire lighting ceremonies there. And we're told in the mythology that Druids, the priests of the Celts, were involved in these fire lighting ceremonies, and that the first ever fire lit in Ireland was lit by a Druid named Mead. So there was some ritual significance to these bonfires that has been lost to us, but we know it was some sacred significance. And the tradition of lighting big bonfires at Halloween continued right into the 20th century and still today in some parts of Ireland. So, for example, in Dublin, in parts of Dublin, children would be on the scout for bits of wood and other things to burn in a local bonfire or in different bonfires. In Irish folklore, fire has different associations. It's associated with good luck and prosperity, to jump a burning when the fire is burning low, also with fertility. And it has a protective association as well. And this might have something to do with the jack-o'-lantern tradition. So fire, in the form of a candle, is placed into a hollowed-out vegetable, root vegetables, most commonly a turnip in Ireland, and a scary face would be carved on it. So one suggestion is that this is to protect against malevolent spirits that are around at Samhain. So Samhain is a time when the other world is somehow closer, when the spiritual world opens up, when some people describe it, the veil between worlds becomes thin, and there are all kinds of spirits associated with, mingling amongst human beings at this time, including the human dead. So there's the concept of the returning dead, which likely has to do with cyclical time, that they come back at this particular point. That's, almost like a crack in time when the other world is closer, which is also the world of the dead. And there are many traditions to do with welcoming the dead back. So, for example, leaving the doors unlocked in the house on Samhain to welcome in the dead relatives who once lived in the house, or setting a plate of food, or simply a plate out that was known as a dumb supper for the returning dead. Samhain is very much about remembering the dead and acknowledging their presence, and this might also be connected to guising or dressing up. So on the one hand, people think it might be to disguise oneself from the spiritual beings that are around. Others think it might be in acknowledgement of the dead. So Samhain is a time, also in mythology, we're told the she mounds or the fairy mounds open up. And these mounds or hollow hills, it's thought that the fairy people, the ace she, get their name from the mounds, the people of the mounds. And these mounds can be pre-Celtic structures, like at the Hill of Tara, there's a series of mounds, and they can also be the ring forts or fairy forts, which are dotted around the Irish countryside. So the spiritual is very much imbued in the Irish landscape all the time, but particularly at Samhain. So it's a magical time associated with, the practice of magic and divination and spirits being around, but it's also a dangerous time to venture out into that landscape or too far from home. So there are specific sites on the landscape connected with Samhain, including Awi or Cave of the Cats in County Roscommon. And this is known as an entranceway or portal into the other world, and is connected with the goddess Morrigan, the great queen, who transforms into a crow, and she emerges from this cave at Samhain. And it's also a time of entering into the wintertime phase of the goddess Cailleach. So the Cailleach is known as a winter goddess and connected with the craggy kind of barren landscapes of winter and also winter storms. And she's particularly associated with the landscape here in Kerry. There's the Cailleach who lives in Dingle, and all of the legends about her there, and her many descendants and so on in Dingle, and also across in Cork with the Beara Peninsula. She's the Cailleach on Cailleach Vera. So the time of Samhain is a topsy-turvy, liminal time. It has a particular kind of atmosphere, and it's when the normal rules are in abeyance, the normal way of doing things doesn't apply, and people can do things they wouldn't normally. And that includes playing pranks. So that tradition of children going door to door asking for sweets or other treats, and where that's not forthcoming, to play a trick or a prank. That's part of the Irish cultural tradition. And interestingly, the traditional Irish funeral or the wake has a very similar atmosphere to Samhain, and pranks were also played at the wake. So we can think of what the connection is between Samhain and Halloween. And we go back to, we know that Samhain is a pre-Christian festival in the Celtic region, so not just Ireland. But when Ireland was Christianized in the early 5th century, and then when it becomes a strongly Catholic country from the 12th century onward, those Christian traditions start to overlay the older pagan festival and cultural understandings and mix in together. And so you get Halloween being moved from Ireland, not just Ireland, but because of this link with America, Ireland to America, and then far beyond America, with the pumpkins as decorations and the pumpkin carving. So this also came back to Ireland, where we now have, pumpkin carving competitions and farmers growing pumpkins for Halloween. So the cultural, hegemony, or the kind of broad reach of the globalized American forms of culture, this is also connected to Hollywood and American films, and we can think of the franchise of Halloween films, where Halloween starts to move into a different space of the sinister and the macabre and everything to do with horror, and also witchcraft, anything that brings in not just magic, but the dark and the scary. So it moves into a space that's quite different from the traditional meanings, the core meanings, the spiritual meanings of Samhain. So is Halloween Irish? In its origins and development, yes.